told us the year victory. And we understood that if victory was going to come in our life, we were going to have to experience victory in the places where we've been bound, where God is going to set us free and also bring about healing. We notice that in relationships, we have been marked. In all aspects of relationship, we have been marked. And so the last 2 weeks, we've talked about the relationship that we have internally with ourselves, and we said it's complicated. And so now we're going to talk about another relationship, and it is complex. Everybody say it's complex. Okay. So we're going to talk about this thing called being single. Okay. How many of y'all have ever been single? If you don't raise your hand, we got a problem. Okay. You've been single at some point in your life, right? Okay. And there, to me, I had the privilege of interviewing and speaking to a number of young ladies, asking them, what does it mean to be single in their context? And so, and then I asked them, give me the definition, because to me, it's very complex, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But if we can show this video, you'll see what they had to say as relates to what does it mean to be single. Let's show the video.
Understood, like, what's the rush?
But I've recently reached a space where singleness seems like a privilege, more of like a season of preparation.
I don't think anything's wrong with being single. I think, like they said, like society really puts that pressure on you, and sometimes your family puts a lot of pressure on you.
You are going to change in your relationship with someone else, because being single is a very unique relationship. When you're single, that means you're adding, once that season changes, you're adding someone into that relationship. What does it mean to be single? So my question to you is, when you hear the word single as it relates to relationship, what does that mean?
No, I feel like being single, at least when I hear it, I just feel like you're not really talking to no one. You more so just on your own thing, worried about you. You're not entertaining other you're not entertaining other things, people, things like that.
Okay, cool. So single is doing you.
Doing you.
Okay. Somebody else, when you hear single, what does that mean, Tatiana?
I also think it's like self-care.
Okay.
Like you're kind of preparing yourself for that.
Okay.
And you, of course, that's the goal, to be with someone. Like you said, it's like a temporary setting.
Yeah.
But you also will just like know that this place won't be forever. So just enjoy it while you have it.
I think there's two different sets of singleness, and I think that you have to be really aware of like where you're at in your singleness before you can even attempt to like really get out of it in a safe and healthy way for yourself.
Yeah.
Very good. Faith?
I think everyone kind of summed up singleness pretty well. I feel like a big misconception of being single is that when you're single, you're alone. And I think a lot of times, like Jazz, like you said, you think looking for another person will complete you, when in your singleness is when you realize that like you're already a full, complete person, and being established in that before you look for someone else, because it does end up being destructive.
All right, that was really cool to have this conversation. We're going to come back in a moment and hear from them again. But I sat there and I listened to these amazing young ladies, and I was overtaken. And if you notice, their theme about being single really does seem to be that they're focusing on themselves. Okay. The reason why I said it's complex, once I left, I actually had a different name for this sermon, but I changed it. I said it's complex because I loved hearing those young ladies talk about what does it mean to be single, but there are different aspects of being single, okay? You can be single on what they call solo. That's what I call it, single and solo. I'm working on me. I'm doing me, okay? I thought that was cute. Like, I'm just going to focus on myself. I even love Tatiana. She said self-care. That was beautiful, like self-care. I'm caring for myself, and, I'm fixing some things inside of me, and I thought that was really neat. But I've also come to realize that there are different complexions of being single. You can be single and a parent. You can be single and solo, like they said, but And I didn't want to go too far in this, but you know you're still single when you're dating? I just want to make sure that, like, you're not married, you know that, right? So, so yes, taxes and all of the laws still, like I'm just focusing on me, okay? Well, even when you're dating, you're still single. That's complex. That's even more complex. You can be single because you're divorced, or you can be single because you're a widow. There are certain things that actually impact our singleness, okay? And if you notice, some of them said, the reason why there's such a big deal about being single is because then I begin to have these external pressures. And see, there's pressure on being single because if you're young and you're cute and you're single, then your family start wondering, what's wrong with you, baby? Why aren't you, what's going on? But then there's the other end of the spectrum where maybe you got a little bit of years and you're single and you're like, what is wrong with my watch? What is this time? Did it stop? What is going on? Because single is taking too long, okay? But what I've noticed is that sometimes people talk about singleness as if it is what they are. And so I want to dispel that right now. The thrust statement that I give you, what I'm going to give you as we begin to focus on this is this simple phrase, and we're going to break it down. Singleness is a season, but it's not your identity. Hear me? Singleness is a season, like winter, spring, summer, or fall. It's a season, and sometimes singleness can be hot and dry and just nothing going on, and it seems like you're about to die. And then other times it can be cold and you feel like you need somebody to warm you up, and then it's springtime and everything is growing and singleness feels so good, but then there comes fall when things start falling off of you and start pushing away. See, singleness has so many different complexions that we need to make sure that we understand what singleness is for, okay? We need to understand why we are single, and in order for us to understand that we're single, if singleness is a season, then that means that it's a season, but there's a new season, a next season, something that could potentially be coming around the corner. And sometimes that next season comes, but because we haven't been what we needed to be in our single season, we end up getting into that new season, and then we end up falling back into that single season. And so then I told the young ladies, well, then if it's all about self-care, it's all about you doing you, and you cool with being single, because I wasn't cool with being single. I don't know much about single because when I was 17, she chased me at high school, and it's been on lockdown ever since. You see what I'm saying? So I don't know much about it, so I'm learning about this, okay? So then I asked him, Lee, please help me understand, in this season of singleness, what are you preparing for? And so if we can show that video, that'd be great. Preparation, do you have that one? There should be another video. You don't have that one? Okay, then I'll just tell you what they were saying, and they were preparing, okay? You sure you don't have it? You don't have it at all? Okay, I'm sorry. Go on the website. We got a new website too. Go on the website where it says media, click other, and you'll hear that part, okay? But they were saying, there are certain things in me. I'm controlling. That's what one of them said. I'm controlling. I want things my way. And another one said, I need to be patient. And so in my season of being single, God is preparing me in my patience. And they had all of these things. And as I noticed that their preparation was a lot of preparation about them. But in order for you to be the best in your season, your preparation is not just about you. It's about who God has called you to be. And this is why if you're married and you say, I don't need to listen to this, oh yes you do. Because many of us, the reason why we're married and we have issues is because we never dealt with those issues when we were single. See, if we had insecurity when we were single, all you did is put a ring on it and you brought insecurity into another relationship. If you had fear and anxiety when you were single in this season, then you bring fear and anxiety into that season. If you have this issue where you feel like you're less than, then you bring it into that relationship. And I'm not just talking about being married, because see, you can be a parent and bring your issues of singleness into your parenting. You can be an employee and you can bring the issues that God is trying to prepare and squeeze out of you in this season where it's just you and him and you don't allow him to, and now you got issues with authority. And so what I've learned is that the beautiful thing about being single is even though you have a dream, because a lot of us dream about what it's going to be like when we step into that new season, or when I get married. He is going to be tall. Like, you get to pick. He is going to be tall, dark, and handsome. And he is going to pay all of my student loans. Yeah. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. When I marry her, she's going to be built like an hourglass. Dude, you better not laugh too much because you might get yourself in trouble. Okay? And she gonna do everything I want her to do. Everything, you hear? Everything, you hear me? Yeah, that's what we thought too. And then what happens is, because when we're in the season of singleness, we actually think that the dream that we have for ourselves is the dream that God has for us. And what I've noticed in being single is what you dreamed of quite often is not what God will give you. He gives you better. He gives you better. And so she may not be built like an hourglass, but she might love the ground that you walk on. You choose which one you want in the long run, okay? He might not be built and look as good as me, but who can be? Who can be? It's hard. I mean, you're fighting against, this is God-given, okay? And so, but what if he honors you, and what if he listens to you, and what if he builds you up? And what you thought in this season was going to be best for you, God knew that there was something better for you. And so I believe that we have to go through this season of singleness, allowing God to prepare us and to teach us what is most important. So singleness is not just about you. And singleness is not just about you doing you. And singleness is more than you caring for you. Singleness is about you allowing God to turn you into the you he always created you to be. That's what it is. Okay? Okay, I get it. So since you don't believe me, since I had 8 claps, we're going to read in the Bible. And I struggle, like, who can we use as an example? And I felt like, why not we use the best example of somebody who's single in the Bible? Jesus. 33 years of being single. Fully man, yet fully God. Which meant that he was tempted and he was tried. And I think he saw a couple of girls that he thought was cute. I really do. But let's see the way he handled it, okay? Singleness. Everybody say singleness. You don't have to say this, but this is what I want you to remember this throughout the week. When you think about this season of singleness, whether you're in it or not, I want you to remember this. By that great poetic prophet, I don't even know his name, he's so great, but he said, I'm living the single, don't. Somebody say it. Life. All y'all old people, all you old people out there, okay. Let's go to the young folks who are looking at me like, what is that? Huh? Okay, let's go to John chapter 15, and we're going to look at verses 4 through 5. And I'm going to give you 4 examples of 4 things that will help us understand that in our season of singleness, these things should be revealed. Singleness is about preparing you. And these things need to be revealed in your singleness. Okay? If they're not revealed in your singleness, you're going to have to deal with them in the next phase that you find yourself in. See, relationships are very diverse and complex, and it's not just about you're going to fix these when you get married. You might have to fix them while you're working for your boss. You might have to fix them as you're parenting your child. You might have to fix them as you're going through different forms of relationship, okay? But the first thing we have to understand is that singleness will reveal who we depend on and who will be receptive to. Who do we depend upon and who are we receptive to? John chapter 15, verses 4 through 8. It says it like this. Abide in me. Everybody say abide. As we go through this text, I want you to pay attention to how many times Jesus is speaking to his disciples as he's beginning to transition now out of his earthly ministry and going to heaven. And he knows that the time is imminent, and he knows that it's fast approaching. And he's given instructions through John chapter 14, 15, 16, and 17, having conversations with his disciples. And he tells them this as he's talking to them. He says this, abide in me and I in you. As the branch, he uses the example of the branch. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. Very important right there. I am the vine. He is the vine. He is the source, and you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him will bear much fruit. In your season of singleness, you want to bear fruit. You don't want to wait until later to bear fruit. Bear fruit now. I think it makes you look cuter. He bears much fruit, for without me, he can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch, and is withered, and they gather him together and they throw him into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me and my word abide in you, you will ask whatever you desire, and it shall be done to you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. See, I believe that what he's talking about here is that in this season of singleness, you're supposed to bear fruit. In this season of singleness, you're supposed to grow. You're supposed to add things to yourself and not feel like something is missing. You're supposed to see God produce things in you that you didn't even know were there. And in this season of singleness, the only way that it's going to come about is if you abide. Everybody say abide. See, abide means to remain. Meno, which in Greek means meno, means to remain, to stay, to wait. And so he's saying this, is that in order for you to be what you need to be in this season of singleness, don't go look and try to be like Beyonce. Beyonce is Beyonce all by herself, and she don't need nobody else. Don't try to be like Oprah. Don't look at the world and try to use those examples of what you're called to be. If you're going to be who you're called to be, God has painted a picture of who you are. He knows who you are. And if you want to know who you are in this season of singleness, the only way you're going to know is if you choose to remain in him. Abide. Everybody say abide. Johannine scripture, when this man, this writer, his name is John, when he writes, and he writes in his books, you'll always see this term in Greek. It says intini, which means it's inward, it's enduring, and it's a personal communion. And so what he's saying is in your season of singleness, endure in communing with me. Because in order for you to know who you are, you have to know who I am. See, in singleness, we try to figure out who am I, and we try to paint a picture of what it is that we want to be, and we base it off of the latest Instagram post, or we base it off the latest thing that we've seen, or we base it even off of our failures and our flaws. And then we try to paint a picture of who we are based upon what we feel. But he says, you can't know who you are unless you know who I am. And it means that in this season of singleness, you need to be vitally connected with Christ. If he wants you, he better show he's been wanting God first. If she wants you, you better see that she's been vitally connected to God first. My wife tells my kids this all the time. If they can't love Jesus, they can't love you. See, the best way for you to know who you are is to show who you're dependent upon. So in our season of singleness, who do you depend on? Because it's just you, though. It's just you, and you paint your own picture of what you think it's going to be, and Barbie and Ken. Yeah, Barbie and Ken, and so we think that it's going to turn out like that because they sold us the doll when we were 3. And we've lived our entire life thinking eventually it's going to be Barbie. We think of our wedding day based upon what we saw because somebody else did it, and we are not abiding in him. But he says also, if you abide in me and I in you, which means also receptivity, that yes, you can seek after him, but can he have access to you? See, if you abide in me, if you remain in me, but can I remain in you? Can I remain in you in those difficult situations? Can I remain in you when you're being tempted? Can I remain in you when you want to do your own thing? Can I remain in you when you're taking care of yourself, but you're taking care of yourself all wrong? Can I remain in you? So he says, if you abide in me and I in you, those are two important things. If you depend upon me and give me access to you, then you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. He says, if you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that is broken and cast away. It withers and is thrown into the fire. And isn't that the way relationships treat us when we don't do relationship right with God? Some type of way we leave broken, and sometimes we leave cast away, and something has been sucked out of us, and it says you've been burned. Have we ever been burned in relationship? Because we want to use this moment to learn what it means to be vitally connected to him. Intini, remain, commune. Let him be the one you depend upon. Let him be the one that you seek after. And let him be the one who you give access. To remain means that you got to know him and know his ways, know his word. And to remain means he's got to know you. We've been going through this thing the last couple of weeks, and I asked people to send me stories, marked stories. We call them marked stories because in relationships, you've been marked, okay? And we want to live a life where, yes, we've been marked, but we've not been scarred by those relationships. And quite often, many of us leave our lives up into the hands of the enemy, and we walk around living marked life and scarred by our past, scarred by our problems, scarred by things that have hurt us. And So I've been writing, people have been sending me their stories, and it's been so beautiful to hear what God is doing, to hear where they were marked, and to see what God is doing. But the beautiful thing is that the only way that we will ever live our lives marked and not scarred is if we depend upon him and not on ourselves. You can try your best to pump it up. You can try your best to make it look cute. You can try your best to cover it. But the only thing that's going to bring you healing is him. And so it means that if we truly are going to enjoy this season of singleness, it means that we have to depend upon him and be receptive to him. The other thing we must do if we're going to go through this and allow God to reveal these things in our life is then we must make sure that, I want to make sure I don't want to skip over anything. God confirms his purpose in your life. Everybody say purpose. In your season of singleness, you want to know your purpose. If you don't know your purpose, once again, if you don't know your purpose now, you're going to be floundering trying to figure it out later. See, in the season where it's just you and God, make sure you know your purpose. Jesus was having a conversation with a woman at the well, and it's in John chapter 4. And what we know about this woman is that she was a woman who had 5 husbands. She had some relational challenges, to say the least. She was ostracized in her own community because in order to go to the well, men would go to the well and they would pull the water out of the well. And then if women would go, they would go in bunches together and they would go pull the water out of the well as women. But if you went by yourself, it meant that you were ostracized in your community because they knew your reputation and they knew something was going on with you. And so this woman was at the well all by herself. She was a Samaritan woman, and Samaritans didn't like Jews and Jews didn't like them. And Jesus comes to her, this woman with issues. And remember what I said? I think Jesus, he knew. He knew. He was fully God and fully man. He knew that she had some relationships. The Bible says he was all alone. All of his boys were gone. And I always wonder, what do I do when I'm all alone and all my boys are gone? And so he tells her, give me something to drink. And she said, you know the Jews don't deal with Samaritans. Why are you asking me? Jesus said this. He says, if you knew the gift of God and who it was that asked you for a drink, you'll be asking me for a drink. That conversation seems very subtle, but you have to understand something. Jesus in this moment, in his moment of singleness and dealing with this woman, understood this, is I know what I'm here for. See, I came here because I have something to give. If you knew the gift of God, I know who I am. I know my purpose. I know what I've been created for. And see, who I am, it works in every situation. Who God has called me to be works in any situation. Who God has called me to be, I don't care if she's messed up. I don't care if she's high up. I still can be used for God's purpose. See, outside things don't dictate who I am. The things that he's established in me determines who I am. And so when I'm at the well and everybody else is looking and don't want to talk to her, and she's looking at me and saying, you don't have anything to do with me, he says, do you know who I am? See, when you're in your single season, make sure you know who you are. Because every relationship is going to try to determine what you will be. See, the beautiful thing about single is once you step into a new relationship, whatever it is, it does impact who you become. It impacts who you become, but you never lose who you are. And so we find ourselves jumping into relationships, and it takes a little bit of who we are. Purpose is not about just who you are. It's about what you have to give. When you're a person of purpose, you step into every relationship with something to give. See, we're trying to prepare ourselves for what we can get. But God says, I'm preparing you so that you can give something away. I always talk about my wife. Listen, she gave me some things when we met. When I first met her, we were in high school, 17 years old, and I saw her walking across the campus at Camelback High School, and I saw this girl, and I wasn't even saved, but the Lord spoke to me. And I saw this little girl. She had this pleated little skirt on, and she had this brown little shirt on with these little flip-flops. I'll never forget it like it was yesterday. And I looked over there, and the Lord spoke, or I spoke, I'm not sure, but I said, I'm going to marry that girl. I'm going to marry her. So then it took me about a month to, muster up some energy to go say hello to her. And so I remember that beautiful day when I saw her and I decided I'm going to go talk to her. And she was back there and I was over here. And it was just like, a fairy tale. I looked at her just like you see on shows and stuff. And I did just like, I said, hey, I want to go with you. And she turned around and said, hey, if you don't know my name, don't ever say hey to me again. My heart began to patter. I was like, oh my goodness. You know why? It's because I was now around somebody who wasn't going to allow me to be the same. She was calling me up to another level. See, she started making me become a little bit more because she knew who she was, and she wasn't going to stoop down to my level. Baby sisters and baby brothers, if you got to stoop down to their level, then you losing your purpose trying to get with them. Stay up at your level and make them come up to where you at because you know your purpose. Make them come up to where you're at. Stop stooping down and going low to get with them. Make them come up, and if they're not willing to come up to that level, they can't breathe the air you breathing anyway. Purpose is about who God has called you and what he's called you to give away. And I'm not talking about your physical things to give away. I'm talking about the goodness of God that is in you that you give away. I love this girl because she made me start making sure that if I was going to be real with God, if I was going to be real with her, I was going to have to be real with God. She gave me more than what I wanted. But I'm so happy because it may become more than what I thought I could be. Purpose. Give your good away, not your goods. Give your good away, your godly good away, and not your goods. Okay? All right, so we understand God's purpose for our life, and then when we get to that moment, we have to understand this is the season of preparation. So I'd like for us to, we ain't got that video. Forget it, I forgot. I said it again. Okay, so then once we go through there, we have to understand that God, in this moment of our singleness, reveals who or what our identity is rooted in. You know you are who you are before you ever add any relationship to you? Do you know that God created you a certain way so that you, when a relationship is added to you, it doesn't complete you? At least not immediately. See, we think when we get into relationships, it's just supposed to complete us. It should reveal you. When your relationship, before it ever completes you, it shows the real you. We try to hide it, and when you date and you don't want them to know, you go into the bathroom, or just like, oh, I don't want them to know. I mean, I'm perfect, right? Try to make everything perfect, and then once you get into the next phase of relationship, all of your imperfections, they show, right? And so we try to cover up who we really are in the early phases, not realizing that's when you're supposed to show who you really are. Like you're supposed to show who you really are. Like people are supposed to know, like, who you are, your identity. Who you are is who God created you. Good and bad. The scars that you bring in, the scars that you allow God to heal in this season will be a source of healing in the next season. As much as we believe that when we come together with someone else, it completes us, before it completes us, we experience conflict. The one that we think we love the most is the one who exposes our weaknesses the most. It shows. Because you can't be with somebody that long and keep covering it up. And so your relationship is not that it's going to complete you. You're in a relationship so that you can complement the other person. Complement. We're not going to be, this person is never going to be everything that you need. You complement them and they complement you. They encourage you and they inspire you. But the only way they can do that is if you know who you really are. Quite often in relationships, instead of us understanding what our true identity is, we lose our identity in relationships. And that's why it's important for us to make sure that we know who we are before we step into those relationships. You are going to change in relationships, but the who that God has placed in you should never change, ever. Jesus is having a conversation, and I believe it's in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. Jesus had been tempted. He had gone into the wilderness. He was all alone. It says that the Lord allowed Jesus to go up into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And Satan came after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and he was weak. And I love that. Our identity is generally challenged in our weak moments. It's true. It's when we're weak. It's when we know, I will do this right now because I'm weak. I will take this right now because I'm weak, and I will compromise. And it says that he was hungry. And here's what the devil comes to him and says, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. Knowing his weakness, knowing that he was vulnerable, he didn't question or he didn't challenge if he was hungry. He challenged his identity. And see, in your season of singleness, there are going to be things that will always ask if you really are a Christian, if you really love her, if you really love him. Do you realize that the devil is always going to come and give you opportunities to deny your true godly identity? If you are. If you are. If you are. Then he starts saying, who are you? What are you? Why do you? He's questioning your identity because he's questioning your identity in God. If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. And I love what Jesus says. Jesus says, you know what he said? Does anybody know what he said? There we go. It is written. It doesn't even matter what he said to me afterwards. He said, it is written. You know where his identity was found? In the Word of God and what God had to say to him. As I've listened and I've sent notes back and forth to people who tell me about their Mark stories, I realize this, is that a lot of people are talking about what has been said about them, but they never tell me what has been written about them. This is what happened to me, and this is what people think about me. This is what happened to me, and this is what people said about me. And I said, who told you that? You know, when Adam and Eve were in the garden and they had sinned, and the Lord being omnipresent and omniscient, he was everywhere and all-knowing. He came to them and he asked them a question, where are you? I love that question. You know God knew where they were at, right? You know that, right? He knew where they were at. You can't play hide and seek with God, just so you know. If you're running from him, it's like running on a treadmill. You're going nowhere and just getting tired. That's all you're doing. I'm being real with you. You ain't going nowhere. You're just wide open. He right there. Just like, okay, whenever you're ready. Because we sit here and we try to run from him, and he said, where are you? Because he wanted them to understand where they found themselves. Where are you? And when you know who you are, you know where you are, and you know what God has called you to, and you know your identity, but when you don't, you're running and trying to figure things out and never knowing who you really are. I would ask him, who told you that? Like, who really told you that? And do you believe that? Do you? Do you really believe that? Because if I believe what the world calls me, I don't know what my identity is in Christ. You believe that? So we have to always understand who we are because of what God says about us. Then lastly, the season of singleness should reveal if we're willing. Everybody say willing. Jesus Christ is now in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he finds himself, and I believe it's John chapter, let me go back and find it. It's Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 through 38. Jesus is now, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. His earthly ministry is about to end. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm so happy he is fully God and fully man, because if I know I'm getting ready to die and I've been single my whole life, I'd be like, God, like you could have hooked me up with like one, like come on. See, but that's what made God so cool about who he really is in Jesus. See, Jesus didn't need anything external to fill him up because he was filled up with the Spirit of God, and he knew who he was, and he had security in who he was. He knew where his dependency lied, and because of that, he knew his true identity. And so nobody else could try to make him feel better about himself, and nobody else could fix the pain that was inside of him. Nobody else could do those things. See, we need those things. And so now Jesus is in the garden, and he's about to die, and he knows it, and he goes to God, and he tells his disciples, I want you to wait right here. I want you to watch, and I want you to pray. He goes to the Lord and he says, Lord. I want to read this to you because this messes me up. This is Jesus, man, fully God, yet fully man. And then he says this in verse 38. He says, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to the point of death. Understanding that even in my natural man, that I'm getting ready to go through something that I don't know if I like, and I'm not sure about this God. He says, he tells the disciples, stay here and watch me. He went a little bit further in his manlyhood and who he was, even the strongest man ever to live. He fell on his face and he prayed. Men, fall on your face sometimes and you pray. You let God know what is in the very crevices of your soul. You're not too tough to get on your knees and to cry out to God. Because if Jesus can do it, we can too. It says he fell on his face and he prayed. And here's what he said. Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup go away from me. Jesus, in his prayer, the first thing he did is he asked God to fulfill his will. But remember I said we need to be willing, right? And quite often when we go to God in our moments of desperation, we are praying and asking God to do our will. We always go to him and say, God, fix my problem. We always seem to fall on our knees and in desperation and say, God, get me out of this. See, if it's possible, I need you to do this for me, God. Fix these things, right? But that's Jesus' will. But you want to know when we know that Jesus was willing? Is when he says, what's next? Can somebody tell me what he said? He said, let this cup pass away from me. What's the next word? You want to know when you're willing? Is when you say nevertheless. You want to know when it's more about him than it's about you? Is when you say nevertheless. You want to know when you are willing to do whatever God has called you to is after you've asked him for everything that you want, the thing that you desire the most, and what you would desire and what you would want, and then you say, nevertheless. See, because when I'm willing, it's not my will. Hear that again. When I'm willing, it's not my will. When I'm truly willing and I'm down with God and I find myself in these moments, when I'm willing, it's not about me. Nevertheless, when I'm willing and things are difficult in my life and I feel like I deserve to have this, nevertheless. When I'm willing and I feel like I've waited too long and everybody else seems to be getting what they get and I'm still out here on the outskirts, nevertheless. When I'm willing and I've been put in a situation and I want to do it, I really do. I want to, like right now, nevertheless. Because if I'm truly willing, it's not my will, it's his will. It's his will. And for us to be who God has called us to be, it's not about our will, it's about his. So God puts us in these seasons to see if we're willing. And what you're unwilling to do in your single season, you'll be unwilling to do in your married season. And what you're unwilling to do in your single season, you're unwilling to do in your parenting season. And what you're unwilling to do in your single season, you're unwilling to do it in your career when there's an authority in your life, because it's always been about your will. So what God does is he puts us in these situations to say, are you willing? And when you're willing, you say, nevertheless. I feel this, God, and it hurts me, but nevertheless, I know your word said I'm healed. These things happen to me, God, and I know that I look at myself a certain way, but nevertheless, I'm fearfully and I'm wonderfully made. God, I know that they've been lying on me, and I know that they've been saying things about me that are not true, but nevertheless, I submit myself to you because you're the righteous judge. I don't defend myself, God, because I know that I'm willing. When they hurl insults at me, I don't retaliate because nevertheless. Because that's what Jesus does. That's the example that he does. Nevertheless, I'll go to my Garden of Gethsemane. I'll face the greatest challenge in my life because of nevertheless. What have I said? In our season of singleness, allow yourself to show who you depend upon and who you're receptive to. And as you go through that, make sure that God reveals his purpose for your life. Because your purpose is not just about what you get, it's about what you give. Add value. Every situation you step into, because you know that God has purposed something for you, add value. And be secure in who he's made you. If you are. You say, no. If I am, it is written. I know who I am because of what he said I am. Not because of what you did to me or what you said about me, or not even because of what I feel. I trust in what you said about me and what you said about my family and what you said about my future. And it might be difficult right now, but I believe that God, when he said, I've never seen the righteous man forsaken nor a seed begging bread, that I can stand on that because I'm his seed. I'm his seed. See, some of you need to leave knowing that you're his seed, that you're covered by the blood of the Lamb, that when the enemy comes to haunt you and harass you, you're covered by the blood of the Lamb because you're his seed. When the devil comes as a wolf in sheep's clothing and makes himself look good and he's coming at you, you don't have to listen to that fake bah because you're his seed, because his children know his voice. I know his voice. And when I know his voice, I know me. But if I know his voice, and I also know the voice of the enemy, and sometimes I choose to ignore his voice for the appealing, pleasurable voice of the enemy, because I'm uncertain of who I am. And then lastly, I gotta be willing. I gotta be willing. Nevertheless, God, if you tell me to forgive, and I hate them, nevertheless. God, if you tell me to humble myself, and I don't want to, nevertheless. And the beauty of this is when you do it in your single season, the only person you have to prove it to is yourself. See, when we step in situations, you should already know. Remember we said, when you win, see, winning is a choice. You make up your mind before you step in it if you're going to win. When I play sports, and I'll be done, I'm going to be real with you. Sports was more about the choice you made. I knew before the play if I was going to make the tackle or not, because it was how willing I was in my heart. How willing was I going to be to inconvenience myself to get what I needed to get? It was a choice. I tried. I looked like I was trying. It looked like, oh, I missed the tackle. No, I made up my mind. See, and a lot of us, if we're going to win in this thing called relationship, you got to choose now. Are you willing? Because if you're willing, you'll live unwillingly. You won't live according to your will. You'll live according to his. And I believe it grants us greater victory than anything we can do on our own. Amen? The video's ready? Y'all want to see that? Man, I was hot. I was good. I felt good. Okay, let's watch this video real fast. Do we have that video? Do we have it? This is preparation, so this will kind of help us real fast. Let's go ahead. He's preparing you for the next season, whatever that is. What do you think he's preparing in you?
So for me, I believe that God is preparing in me patience and getting rid of the sense of control that I think I have.
Yeah.
Because in the past, I've just been very controlling in relationships due to I would say, the absence of my physical father here. And I really felt like whenever God was leading me to go one way, I would have to stick my hand in and like try to manipulate situations to have it to go my way. And I feel like my single season is being prolonged because he's really testing, like, you don't have control. Like, you think you have control, but you do not have control in this. And I know what's best for you. And so I think it's a patience, and I think it's really just ensuring that I'm okay with being where I am without wanting it to be any different.
Very good. Faith?
So I took a year off of dating in 2017 and 2018, like on purpose, and I was like not even texting boys, like, and I feel like God did such a work in my life on just solidifying like who I was and my identity. And then a little after that year was up, I got into a relationship, and I thought it was like my reward. I was like, yes, this is it. Like, I passed the test. Like, I made it in here, and the outcome essentially was the same as what had happened before. And I was a changed person, but the outcome didn't change. So I feel like right now God is just solidifying in me, like trusting Him, even though like the outcomes might be the same. Like fully trusting Him that He has a plan, even when it doesn't feel like an instant reward.
Very good.
I feel like it's multiple things, like it's patience, and I also get bored very quickly. So I also need to learn how to like take my time and not be so short. So I'm like, oh no, on to the next, he's not the one, you know? And I feel like that's something I need to work on. Like, why isn't he? Or are you really giving that person the time that they deserve? Or are you just over it and don't want to give that person time?
Good. Very good. What, man? Those young ladies really helped me, and so I'm actually recruiting men this week, because this week we talked about what does it mean to be single and solo, okay? But next week we're going to talk about single and dating. And so I want some brave men to sit down with me, and we're going to talk about what is dating? What is the purpose of dating? Why do you date? And then what is God's plan for dating? All right, so I want men, that email address marked at valleygatechurch.org. If you want to sit down and talk to me and we talk about dating, we're going to talk about that next week, because I believe God also has a plan for us to understand His plan for dating. And when we don't live according to His plan for dating, we leave scars. We do. And so I'm excited about that. So I want to encourage you all, whether you're single or not, the things that I shared will be a part of your life from this point on. God will refine you in these areas. He will continue to show you His identity and what He's called you to be. And He will bring someone even in your life to help show who you really are. So let's allow God in this season to make us who He's called us to be. Amen? Can I pray for you? Father, we thank You so much, and we honor You. Lord, we believe that we are a living witness of what victory will look like in our relationships. God, I thank You that there's a season that we all find ourselves in. It's our season of preparation. And I believe that many of us here, whether we're married for many years or whether we're in our season of singleness, we need to be dependent upon You and be receptive to You. We need to continue to chase after You so that we would know what Your purpose and Your plan is, so that we would have something to give and not only want to give. We would understand our true identity, and we would say, nevertheless, not my will, but Your will be done. There are some people here, you've struggled because you really think you got this. And I'm going to go as far as to say this, and please don't hear me wrong, but we kind of lie on God, and we try to make it seem like we've really gone to God, and this is what God has said He wants us to do when we know it's only about us. I believe some people here today, they need to say, nevertheless, not my will. If I truly want to experience what You have for me in this new season, I need to learn how to say, God, not my will, but Your will be done. It may mean that I have to go through something difficult and may have to let something go for a season, a time in my life. But I believe there are a couple of people here that you know that you need to declare today, nevertheless, not my will, but Your will be done. If that's you with your eyes closed and your head bowed, just lift your hand up so I can pray for you. Amen. I see those hands, and you can put them down. I'm going to pray for you first. Father, I thank You for each person in this season. They're learning what it means to trust You. You're letting them know that their identity is more tied up in You than anything else. And who they become in this season will be a blessing to whoever they step into a relationship in the next season. But they have to say nevertheless. They can't lie to themselves anymore and try to act like this is what God wants when honestly it's what they want. And they have to say, not my will, God, but Your will be done. Strengthen them, God, to make the right decision. And in so doing, allow this to be the best decision of their life, the most fruit they've ever experienced. the most they've been able to give and not take away. And so much joy that they bring instead of pain that remains. There may be some people here as well that you don't have a relationship with Christ Jesus. You go to church, you might do that, but you've done things on your own and you follow your own way, and you've never chosen to say, I turn from this place and I choose to completely, with all of my heart, follow him. Today I want to give you that opportunity to say, today I choose to follow Jesus with all of my heart. If there's anybody here that says, I want to follow Jesus, I want to turn away from sin, I want you to raise your hand so I can see you, so I can pray. I see that hand. I see that hand. I see that hand. You can put them down. I want each and every one of us to pray this prayer, because if you know you need to pray this prayer but you couldn't right now, I want you to know how to pray it when you get home. Repeat after me. Dear Lord, I'm lost without you. I cannot bear fruit without you. But today, I choose to turn away from sin and chase after you. I want to remain in you and you in me. Forgive me, cleanse me, and heal me. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's give God a hand clap of praise. Amen. Let me encourage you all, love this season that God has you in and begin to allow him to add to you. Be the greatest one that he's called you to be. Don't just be the best you. That will always fall short, but you be the best you that God has called you to be. You're better than what you think you are. You're bigger than what you think you are. And God has more in store for you, but it all starts with him. And that's why he says you need to abide in me.